That brought some healing to our middle school selves. Thank you, Aaron and Josh. I appreciate that so much. Friends, we are in week 4 of our series, Faith Without Fear. And this week, we are exploring salvation without shame. And just saying those words out loud raises some of our cortisol levels a little bit too, but stick with me because there's something beautiful here, I believe. But speaking of cortisol, I want to make a confession first. I remember when I was 6 years old, the very first lie I consciously told. And I'm going to tell you about it today. It all began with a dirt clod in our front yard. Just one of those perfect, round, dense, aerodynamic dirt clods that just asked to be thrown. And so I did. I threw it as high and as hard as I could, and it flew in this beautiful, perfect arc and splat. Dead center on the front of our house. I felt proud like Jackson Pollock of the cul-de-sac. Until a little bit later that day when my mom asked me, "Jonathan, do you know who threw mud on our house?" And my response was, no idea. I have no idea who did that. I'm shocked, I tell you, that someone would do that. And I carried that lie with me the whole day. And so that night, I just spent my whole day just kind of hiding out from eye contact with my parents. And that night, when my mom came to tuck me in, I just exploded in tears and in truth. I did it. I'm the one. I threw the dirt. I am so sorry. And my mom just hugged me and said, "I know." And I was like, what? How could you know? It could have been any 6-year-old in our cul-de-sac that did that. And she said, "Jonathan, I love you, and it doesn't change because you made a mistake. You can trust that. You don't have to hide when you make a mistake. I love you, period." Parent relationships are always complicated, yes. But that memory shaped so much of how I understand love. And I think about it today on this Mother's Day and introduce this sermon with you a little bit because it stood in contrast, I think, to some of what I was absorbing from church and from culture about God. God, as I was absorbing it, was a God of shame and salvation and was nothing like that experience of my mom. That God that I was absorbing was a judge, right, with a list and a gavel. And the interaction with God wasn't always a bedtime hug. If there was any salvation in there, it was the stay of a courtroom verdict, right? That you better have a get-out-of-jail-free card because you're guilty, and the wall of your house with the mud splatter proves it to you. In some of my childhood experiences, that vision of salvation was referred to as fire insurance. You may have heard that before. And just in case, whatever happens in life, you definitely want to make sure that your paperwork is in order before you need that insurance. But here's what that vision of salvation does to a 6-year-old. It teaches you that a fundamental part of your relationship with God includes the potential to be punished. And so the best place, the safest place to be is quietly out of sight, to hide. I did something wrong that day, yes, absolutely. But the voice of shame says that you are something wrong, that I am something wrong. And that voice of shame doesn't motivate change and transformation. It motivates hiding. And that 6-year-old me, terrified to tell the truth, was learning to hide. Brene Brown, who has done a lot of work and research around the power of shame in our lives, names what this experience does. She says most people still subscribe to the belief that shame is a good tool for keeping people in line. Not only is it wrong, but it's dangerous. Shame corrodes the very part of us that believes we are capable of change. That is that fear-based world that I was absorbing in one sentence. It may lead to conforming, but it will never help us be transformed. Love does that. So Brene Brown's research is clear. She says shame thrives on 3 things: on secrecy, on silence, and judgment. Secrecy, silence, and judgment. Hide what you are, stay quiet, and face judgment against that verdict. So we still see that pattern in grown-up life, don't we? And it's heartbreaking. The harm is real. But the hope I want to share with us today is that it is not God. That voice, yes, has a long history in religious spaces, but it did not descend on high from heaven. It was built from the bottom up by humans, by us, by institutions, yes, in some ways, but this force that seeks to keep it all in line and the systems humming. Because when Jesus walked through this world, what he actually preached was not shame, not fire insurance. It was a different message. It was good news. The kingdom of God, the love, the relationship with God is here. It's here for you. It's not only far off, and it's definitely not far off in a place where St. Peter is at the gates checking papers, right? So Marcus Borg, theologian, writes this. He says, distilling all of this to heaven and hell Christianity becomes like this black hole that sucks in the meaning of Christian language, obscuring the dream of God for this world. Shame obscuring shalom, God's dream of flourishing for all of us, here and forever. Salvation becomes reduced to a destination, but in God's loving arms, salvation is about transformation, here and forever. And friends, that is the voice of God, the God who meets our dirt-clawed nights with open arms of love. And if we peel away the layers that have been built up, there is a true voice beneath it all. And the community of John captured it for us in this verse that has become the theme for this series. It says, God is love. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, for fear has to do with punishment. Fear has to do with punishment, and love casts it out. And God is love. And if I just sit with that verse for just a few minutes, that one thought unravels so much that my 6-year-old self doesn't even know what to do with it on the other side. If fear has to do with punishment and God is love, then in the words of the great Tina Turner, what's love got to do with it, right? Which is a great question, Tina. Thank you for asking that for us today. So, what does love have to do with all of this? What does salvation do in love? So the English word that we get the word salvation from comes from the Latin word salvus, the same root as our word salve, that healing ointment that our grandmother kept in a tin and put on everything, right? Salvation etymologically means healing, healing applied to the place of woundedness, of hurt. And in Greek, the language of the New Testament, the word is very similar. It's sozo, to heal, to rescue, to make whole, to make well. Every ancient word for salvation is about healing and wholeness. None is about punishment or escape. John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist movement, said it directly. He said, "By salvation, I mean not barely deliverance from hell or going to heaven, but a present deliverance from sin, a restoration of the soul to its original health." Original, your soul, created whole and good, and we've been wounded and tarnished along the way by things that have happened and things that we've chosen. But salvation is at work like a salve, healing what hurts. Because our soul is not meant for harm, it is meant for health. And God is at work to bring it about now and forever. In Hebrew, the word that's often used for salvation is yasha, to make wide, to open up, to save, to deliver. To open up what's been closed off. When the doors of life seem closed to us, yasha is God opening them wide. When our souls are hidden and closed off by shame, yasha is God opening us back up and setting us free. And that's the pathway out of shame. As Brene Brown writes, shame cannot survive being spoken and being met with empathy. Bringing those long dirt-clawed nights into the light with someone who meets you with love loosens the grip. The soul coming back to itself from under the covers of shame. That is yasha, sozo, salvation. One of the things that I love about the Arapaho community is that everywhere you turn, on joining day, at Coffee and Connection, in our small groups, in every honest conversation, we say something like, "Come, tell your story. Tell us about who you are. You can tell it here. You don't have to, but you can. We will listen with empathy. We will listen and learn with curiosity, and we will love with all we have, and we will not let you be ashamed," which is beautiful and healing, and in some ways a part of this work, because salvation is about that. It is about restoration to the image of God you were created to bear. God isn't saving you from you. God is saving you to you, back to who you were always built to be. It's not about making you into someone else. It's about restoring you back to the original health, bringing you out of hiding to your true self, the soul God already declared from the very beginning in chapter 1 is very good. And beneath the shame that hides, inviting us to live into that image of God and to walk as a child of God in the light. And so I want to tell you about someone who learned this along the way. We find this story from the stories of Jesus' life in the gospel we call Mark chapter 5. This is how the story begins. There had been a woman who had been suffering from chronic bleeding condition for 12 years. For 12 years, which is 4,383 days, right? And I'm sure that she knew all of them because in her time, this meant more than a medical condition. The system, because of her specific condition, declared her body itself unclean and this woman untouchable, contagious. She couldn't enter the synagogue. She couldn't be near her family. She had to live in hiding beneath the shame of all of it. But she heard about this guy, Jesus, and she thought, maybe, just maybe. And so she hid herself amongst a big crowd and approached him from behind in secret. She didn't dare ask out loud or speak up. She kept her eyes down and she just thought, if I can just touch the hem of his cloak, I will be made well. The Greek for made well is sozo, salvation. I'll be saved. I'll be made well. As Pastor Nadia Boltz-Weber writes in her essay on this story, she says, the woman thinks, if I can touch his clothes, I will be made well. And what she really means is, if I can touch his clothes, I will be made me again. Made me. The me before the shame, the me that God made. Original. And so she reaches and she touches, and immediately, the story says, she is sozo. She's healed. She's saved. She's made well. But Jesus knows that the physical isn't the whole story of healing. This woman, because of her condition, has experienced exclusion and doors closed to her for 12 years. Disability theologian Amy Kinney writes about this distinction that the church has too often missed between the cure and the healing. The cure is symptoms changing, but the person being restored to themselves and to their community and in some way to their full place as a child of God, being set free from shame and exclusion, that is the healing, the salvation, the reconnection to life. And along the way, we can't always cure everything, but we can always bring healing. We can always include. And so Jesus will not let this moment stay hidden. He stops in the middle of the crowd and he says, "Who touched me?" And the disciples are like, "Dude, everybody's touching you. Don't be such a Karen," right? It's a crowd. It's just what happens. But Jesus isn't chatting or Karening in this moment. He's caring. He's looking for her face. After 4,383 days of no one making eye contact with her, Jesus refuses to just pass by. Shame teaches you to stay invisible, but salvation says you are seen and you are loved. The healing isn't done until the hiddenness ends for this woman. And so she comes forward from her hiding in fear and trembling, the story says. It says that she tells him the whole truth. She tells her story. And Jesus responds with deep empathy, and he says, "Daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. Be healed." Daughter, the only place in all of the Gospels that Jesus calls anyone by that word. In that one word, Jesus refuses every label that the system had hung on her, every bit of shame that has covered over her life, and he names what is true of her all along. Beloved child of God, made whole in God's image. The image was always there. It just needed someone to see it and to call it by name. And it brought healing. It wasn't only that the bleeding stopped. The healing was that she was seen as herself again and was welcomed with wide open love. Yeshua, that Hebrew word for salvation, to open what had been closed off. There's a Hebrew name that's built on that word. Yeshua, Jesus. The one who opens what was closed. Jesus is the name of the man who stopped in the crowd, who called her daughter, who calls you, beloved child of God, and invites us out of the hidden places back to ourselves. Opening doors of love is the way of Jesus. And wherever Yeshua walked, Yasha was happening. Doors closed were open, narrow points of view were widened, and what seemed sealed away behind a stone forever breaks open into new life. That's what love does. And that is salvation. It's what every word, salvus, Yeshua, sozo, Wesley's vision of original health has been pointing to all along. That you're not a defendant. You are a daughter, a child of God, someone Yeshua is looking for in the crowd. Not a project to be saved from. You're someone being saved to who you truly are. Shame's loudest lie: if they knew, they wouldn't love me. And God's response every single time: I know, and I really love you. You don't have to hide. I love you. You are a child of God, beloved, period. And that love transforms us and heals us and begins to restore us back to the people that God has created us to be. And then it sends us out into the world to do the very same thing as we go through the crowds of our life, to be part of that salvation work, to live with open arms and open hearts and open doors, to meet what the world keeps hidden with empathy and compassion. And when our world tells us to avert our eyes and just move on, the way of love, the way of Jesus, of Yeshua, says, before your eyes is a beloved child of God. It whispers that to us in our neighborhood. It whispers that to us as we serve at Network. It whispers that to us in the grocery store aisles and the idle moments in the crowds of life. And it invites us all to be part of God's salvation, the work of the kingdom of God right here where we are. That's what love does. And that's what it's always been about. Scriptural salvation is always twofold transformation, Marcus Borg writes, of ourselves and of the world. And John Wesley said it in many ways like this plainly: there is no personal salvation without social salvation. The healing that starts here doesn't stay here. It widens us. It opens up what was closed, and it seeks to make a way for all. Against every shame that the world has tried to make stick, it chooses to love all people as beloved children of God. That is the work of Yeshua in the world. It's at work in the school pickup line. It's at work in the hospital room. It's at work at the ICE detention center at Dallas. It's at work when we sit with those with grieving hearts, with the kids who need to know they're loved exactly as they are. Wherever there is a soul the world does pass by, there's salvation work waiting for us to stop, to see, to listen, to love. That's what love does. That is Yeshua with hands and feet, and it is our calling to step into this world with love and with wide open arms and to be a part of undoing shame's hiding with God's healing. I think back to that 6-year-old bedroom when I was ashamed and hiding, and my mom came to tuck me in, and before I could even get the words out, she loved me. She knew who I was, and she loved me. And that small story in my life, friends, is just a glimpse of the biggest story of all. Salvation, it's not a verdict, it's not a ticket. It's that embrace that our soul has been waiting for since we were 6. You are loved. And if part of you is still hiding, know that in God's love, you can step out into the light. You are loved. You are known. Perfect love casts out fear with wide open arms. Fear has to do with punishment, but love has to do with salvation. Friends, may you know how deeply you are loved. And may it bring healing to you. And may it bring healing through you to this world. In the name of the God who is love and whose work of salvation brings healing and shalom. Amen.